Far below the reach of sunlight, the ocean begins to feel wrong. Shapes appear that seem unfinished, distorted, or hostile to familiar life. Eyes grow too large, mouths too wide, bodies too fragile or too aggressive. The deeper explorers descend, the less recognizable animals become, as if biology itself starts to abandon the rules that feel safe near the surface. Early deep-sea explorers struggled to describe what they found. Nets returned with animals that defied classification, their bodies damaged by pressure changes, yet clearly bizarre even in fragments. Some scientists initially believed these forms were deformed surface species. It took decades to accept that these unsettling shapes were not accidents, but stable, fully evolved organisms thriving in darkness. What scientists do know begins with the environment itself. The deep sea is defined by darkness, crushing pressure, near freezing temperatures, and limited food. Sunlight disappears within the first few hundred meters, removing the primary energy source for most ecosystems. Below this point, life depends on falling debris, chemical energy, or predation, shaping bodies in ways rarely seen elsewhere. As depth increases, pressure rises rapidly. At several kilometers down, animals endure forces hundreds of times greater than at the surface. This pressure compresses gases, alters chemical reactions, and destabilizes biological structures. To survive, deep-sea organisms often lack air-filled spaces and rigid bones, resulting in soft, gelatinous bodies that appear fragile but function perfectly under immense force. Vision changes dramatically in the deep ocean. Many species develop enormous eyes to collect the smallest traces of light, while others abandon eyesight entirely. Bioluminescence becomes common, used for communication, camouflage, and hunting. These glowing organs create eerie flashes in total darkness, making animals appear otherworldly. Yet these light signals are often the most reliable sensory information available in the abyss. Food scarcity is another defining feature. In the deep sea, meals are unpredictable and rare. Many animals adapt by slowing their metabolism, conserving energy, or evolving expandable stomachs capable of swallowing prey nearly their own size. This leads to grotesque proportions, oversized jaws, distended bodies, and needle-like teeth, structures shaped not by abundance, but by long periods of starvation. Movement itself becomes unusual. Some deep-sea creatures barely swim, drifting slowly to conserve energy. Others rely on sudden, explosive motion to capture prey. Fins shrink, muscles thin, and bodies elongate. These forms appear weak by surface standards, yet they are finely tuned to a world where every movement carries an extreme, energetic cost, and mistakes can be fatal. Chemical senses often replace sight. In darkness, detecting vibrations, pressure changes, and dissolved molecules becomes essential. Many species develop elongated sensory organs, whisker-like structures, or highly sensitive lateral lines. These adaptations can distort the body silhouette, making animals appear asymmetrical or unfinished, though every extension serves a precise sensory purpose in a lightless world. Color loses its meaning in the deep. Without sunlight, bright pigmentation offers no advantage. Many animals become transparent, black, or blood red, colors that effectively vanish in darkness. This absence of familiar coloration contributes to the unsettling appearance of deep-sea life. where bodies seem ghost-like or void-like, reflecting an environment where visibility is almost entirely irrelevant. Growth and aging also follow different rules. Many deep-sea creatures grow slowly and live far longer than similar surface species. Cold temperatures and low metabolism reduce cellular damage over time. Some fish and invertebrates may live for decades, even centuries. This slow pace of life contrasts sharply with their monstrous appearance, revealing an environment where survival favors patience over speed. Together, these observations form a pattern. As depth increases, bodies simplify, senses exaggerate, and behaviors become extreme. Nothing about these creatures is random. Each unsettling feature reflects direct pressure from the environment. Yet despite this logic, a deeper problem remains. Even with these adaptations, many deep-sea forms seem biologically excessive, raising questions science cannot easily answer. From a biological perspective, many deep-sea adaptations appear inefficient or unstable. Oversized eyes require energy in a world where food is scarce. Soft bodies lack protection from predators. Extreme jaws and teeth seem risky to develop and maintain. According to surface-based evolutionary logic, these traits should be selected against, not repeated across unrelated species in the depths. Darkness removes one of evolution's most powerful drivers, visual selection. Without sight, features like symmetry, color, and recognizable form should lose relevance. Yet deep-sea animals do not become uniform or simple. Instead, they diversify into increasingly bizarre shapes. This contradicts the expectation that reduced sensory input should produce more generalized, less specialized body plans. Energy economics present another contradiction. Evolution typically favors efficiency, especially in resource-poor environments. However, many deep-sea species invest heavily in single-use adaptations, like bioluminescent lures or enormous mouths that may rarely be used. These costly traits persist despite their apparent inefficiency, suggesting that survival in the deep may reward extremes rather than balance. Predation dynamics also defy expectations. In an environment where encounters are rare, predator and prey evolve features that seem disproportionate to their interactions. Some predators appear overarmed for prey they may meet only a few times in a lifetime. Others look defenseless, yet persist. These mismatches suggest that selection pressures in the deep ocean operate on unfamiliar, poorly understood timelines. Reproduction poses perhaps the most puzzling problem. Many deep-sea species reproduce infrequently, with low population densities and minimal offspring survival. From a surface perspective, these conditions should lead to extinction. Yet these species persist for millions of years. Their continued existence challenges assumptions about minimum population sizes and reproductive success required to sustain complex life. Many deep-sea species also exhibit extreme specialization to very narrow niches. They rely on specific prey, precise depths, or rare environmental conditions. Such specialization is typically risky, making organisms vulnerable to change. Yet in the deep ocean, these fragile-looking specialists endure for geological timescales, contradicting the idea that extreme environments should favor flexibility over precision. Isolation adds another layer of difficulty. Deep-sea populations are often separated by vast distances, with little opportunity for genetic exchange. This isolation should increase inbreeding, and reduce adaptability. Instead, many deep-sea lineages show remarkable genetic stability. How these populations avoid collapse, despite limited connectivity, remains one of the deep ocean's most persistent evolutionary puzzles. Taken together, these contradictions suggest that the deep sea operates under a different evolutionary framework. Traits that seem excessive, inefficient, or unstable by surface standards persist without obvious penalty. The deeper scientists look, the harder it becomes to apply familiar biological rules, hinting that fundamental assumptions about adaptation may not hold in Earth's largest habitat. One possibility is that the deep sea evolves slowly enough that extreme traits face little competition. With few predators and minimal environmental change, even inefficient adaptations may persist. However, this explanation struggles to account for the repeated emergence of similar bizarre forms across unrelated species, suggesting that something more than simple isolation is guiding deep-sea evolution. Another hypothesis points to developmental constraints. Under extreme pressure and cold, only certain body plans may be physically possible. Evolution may be funneling life into a narrow range of viable shapes that merely appear strange to surface observers. Yet this does not fully explain the diversity of forms seen at similar depths, where radically different designs coexist. Bioluminescence adds further uncertainty. While its functions are partially understood, the sheer variety of light-producing structures suggests multiple unresolved roles. Some patterns do not clearly attract prey, deter predators, or communicate with mates. The persistence of seemingly purposeless light displays implies that deep-sea signaling may operate under rules science has yet to identify. Genetic studies deepen the mystery. Many deep-sea organisms possess genes that appear highly conserved, changing little over time, alongside others that evolve rapidly. This uneven pace of evolution is unusual. It suggests that certain systems are locked into narrow solutions, while others remain flexible, creating organisms that feel both ancient and experimental at the same time. Even long-term monitoring is rare. The deep ocean is vast, expensive to access, and difficult to observe continuously. As a result, scientists lack full life histories for most species. Without knowing how these animals grow, age, reproduce, and die, many interpretations remain speculative, reinforcing the sense that deep-sea biology is built on incomplete information. Environmental stability may hide unseen variability. While the deep ocean appears constant, subtle shifts in temperature, chemistry, and food supply may have outsized effects. These slow, nearly invisible changes could shape evolution in ways difficult to detect, producing adaptations that seem excessive only because the selective pressures acting on them remain largely unmeasured and poorly understood. Each new expedition adds more questions than answers. For every explanation proposed, exceptions emerge. Patterns dissolve under closer inspection. The deeper science looks, the less certain it becomes about what governs form and function in the abyss, leaving the unsettling impression that the deep sea follows rules not yet written into biological theory. These unanswered questions matter because the deep sea represents the majority of Earth's living space. Most of the planet's habitable volume exists under pressure and darkness. If biology operates differently there, then many principles taught as universal may only apply to a narrow, surface-bound fraction of life on Earth. Understanding deep-sea life also reshapes ideas about life beyond Earth. Moons and planets with dark oceans beneath ice share similar conditions. If complex organisms can thrive under crushing pressure without sunlight here, it expands the range of environments considered potentially habitable elsewhere, challenging assumptions about where life can exist and what forms it might take. At the same time, deep-sea ecosystems are increasingly exposed to disturbance. Because their life histories are slow and specialized, even minor disruptions may have irreversible effects. Without understanding the logic behind their strange forms and fragile persistence, humanity risks altering systems it barely comprehends, potentially erasing answers to questions science has not yet learned how to ask. In the end, the deep ocean remains a reminder of how limited human understanding still is. As depth increases, familiarity fades, and biology drifts away from expectation. The creatures growing stranger in the darkness are not mistakes or monsters. They are evidence that life can organize itself in ways that feel unsettling, simply because they evolved beyond the reach of our intuition.